The last week of the preseason, and guess what? That means it's the last time to make a good impression. We'll tell you who's going to do it and who may not today on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yeah, man, you heard what she said. It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. You can find us wherever you get your podcast, audio-wise. You know where that is. You know. And then video-wise, you can go over to our Locked On Jaguars YouTube page. Make sure you do that so you do not miss an episode each and every day of the show. That's right. Hey, man, I'm going to let you know right now. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by, wait for it, it is FanDuel. Now, listen to me, man. It is getting close to the season, but I want you to hear this. Through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Shout out to the Everydayers for joining us every day. We appreciate you very, very much. All right, let me tell you where we're going and how we're going to start. First, where we're going to end up. We're going to compare and contrast the Atlanta Falcons and the Jacksonville Jaguars for tonight's game. We'll do that. I want you to focus on the fact that we're going to compare each team where they are, because they were really even a few years ago. We're going to look at the skill position players as well as some of the players on defense. Make it or break it. This is the time of the year where some players have been working their whole life for this, and they're going to get that pink slip, and they're going to go out tonight and play very, very hard. We're going to talk about some of those guys on the depth chart that have a chance to really, really make an impression. Now, let's start out with this. First time for a last impression. What does that mean? Those guys I talked about, this is their first chance to make a last impression, but more so, in the first segment, we're going to talk about guys that are already on the roster that want to try to cement or establish their place on that depth chart. That is very, very important. I'll say this. While I believe, and I've always believed this, and personnel people won't admit this, they kind of know when you're looking at the 53, right? There are certain levels of this. You have the 53-man roster. I would guess that they probably know 47 of them, and they're taking a last look to see who makes those 6 spots. But I don't think they're looking at 6 people. I think they're looking at about 15 people, because they have to figure out exactly how many folks they're going to keep at every single position. And if somebody is just too good enough from a value standpoint to let that person go, or to think that they're going to make the practice squad, which they are not, then there's another level. The next level of that is, well, who is going to be able to make the practice squad and clear the waivers and clear being cut without someone else picking them up and being poached realistically. They're also going to take a look at something else, and this will sort of tie into the compare and contrast from a player standpoint. They need to outshine the players that on the other team tonight that are playing the exact same position. The last thing you want to do is have an okay game, and then the Atlanta Falcons, they have a position on their team that is extremely deep, almost, I believe, like the Jaguars' defensive backs are. And then there's a dude right there while your pro personnel department and your GM is standing there watching in person that they believe can help this team better than you can, because there's some of that. So here's what's going to happen over the next 7 days when they have to make their cuts. I believe it's before next Monday. And what's going to happen the days after that. You are not guaranteed a roster spot if you make the 53 that comes out when they have to make initial cuts. Because when they make initial cuts, everybody else is going to make initial cuts, and there's going to be some movement. There's going to be some practice squad guys that get signed. There's going to be guys that get cut. There's going to be guys from other team, players from other team that will take up roster spots and practice squad spots from guys that are on the Jaguars team. It is an ongoing evaluation process. Tonight being the last time that these teams will play before all of that stuff has to happen is extremely important for a lot of people. A lot of people. I'm going to get to those folks in just a second. I think it's also extremely important, especially since the Jaguar starters are playing in the first half. I do not know if the Falcons are going to do the same thing, but I'm just going to assume that it's going to be kind of similar, right? Here's what's important. This is the last time to make a good impression. It's the last time to make a good impression for guys like Press Taylor, like the Jaguars starting lineup on the offensive line, defensive guys that are fighting to start, just to soothe the fans, especially the coaching staff, right? And now you got Ryan Nielsen, the defensive coordinator, going against the team that he coached for last year. That obviously they had a chance to retain him, and they didn't do it. He's not going against anybody that was on his staff. The Falcons have an entirely new staff. They're running a 3-4 defense, an odd front. So it's not really, you can't say that they know Ryan Nielsen. No, the people in the front office are familiar with this game, but I would think that any familiarity they have with Ryan Nielsen from Raheem Morris's standpoint that came to do probably has more to do with the fact that they probably coached against each other for a number of years and they're very familiar with each other, even though Raheem is not the offensive coordinator. But still, I do believe this is the last time that this team will have a chance, and maybe even the first time that they're going to be out there for an extended period of time. And it also may be the first time that they have somewhat of a healthy offensive line to see if those guys can get together and do like the Temptations and be all cohesive and be having all of this chemistry that you need in order to go out and play. Easing the fans and easing the media attention on certain parts of the team that people don't think are strong enough, it ain't going to help them win one game. It will help people stop asking questions about that. And as we've heard over the years, people really don't like answering questions about the same thing over and over again, especially athletes, because it becomes sort of a mental distraction. And then if somebody wants to get upset, and nobody likes to hear bad things about them, people start getting mad, people start getting upset. And then now they got to get it back together mentally before they go out and play on the field. And nobody wants any of that stuff, right? So guys just want to get confidence. I do believe the offensive line gained a little bit of confidence in the second half of game 2 because they started to really, really run the ball and they started to move the ball. But those are not the starters. So you can look at that two ways. You could say those are not the starters, and that means nothing. Or you could look at it the other way and say good, because these guys were battling for depth. Cole Van Lanen has all of a sudden become the guy that all the media people love on that offensive line. They believe that he is a mover and a shaker and a guy that could really, really push those starters if they don't get their act together, especially if somebody, and he's a guard and a tackle, especially if somebody doesn't really perform well or they're a little bit unhealthy. So when you're talking about people to make a first impression, the first name I think about is Cole Van Lanen, because when you hear media people start bragging about a dude and you see former players talking about his performance, it was Cooper Hodges, and then Cooper Hodges had a little bit of a rough game in pass pro. Now, the person's name that you hear all the time is Cole Van Lanen. That's what I'm talking about. Can he make a push to tell the Jaguars, you ain't going to be able to leave me on the sideline, especially if someone like Ezra Cleveland isn't healthy? Can he do it? Is it going to be possible for him to force the Jacksonville Jaguars to do something that none of us think is going to happen? Now, you say, so what if the fans in the media like Cole Van Lanen? What's that happen? I've done this long enough to know that what that means is not only has he done some stuff well, if you've seen it with your own two eyes, but we have ears. People say stuff. They say it off the record, and you know better than to say anything. Somebody might say, ooh, number 7, he looked real good. And that's somebody that said it might be somebody important. That's a decision maker. I'm not saying that's what happened, but what I am telling you is where there's smoke, there's usually fire when it comes with players all of a sudden gaining popularity that you never seen them have before. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about make it or break it. Folks that I believe, veterans and young players, that are going to have to do a really, really good job for the Jacksonville Jaguars in order to secure the spot that they want. We'll talk about that and more here today on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by BetterHelp. Hey, man, BetterHelp is the absolute truth when it comes to therapy. I know, and I'm telling you from personal experience, that I have had a number of reasons to go to therapy. I'm telling you. And I did not expect that a few years ago, but it has been absolutely wonderful for me, my family, to get through the death of a very, very special loved one, to figure out time management and how am I going to do all the things I need to do, especially now with school going back and having to pick people up. My son now has a new kid, a 1-year-old in school now. And he was like, Pops, I don't know how you used to manage and do this. Well, I learned how to do it by seeking help. That's right. BetterHelp. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, man, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. It is really, really helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries, and that is very, very important. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, second segment here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars. We really, really do appreciate you joining us. Here's what I want you to do, though. I got my fantasy draft this weekend, so y'all better follow my lead. We love you making this podcast your first listen. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Get daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get down to it. Let's get down to it right now. A lot of the dudes that I'm going to mention here may not have too much effect on your fantasy team. Generally, anybody that's going to affect your fantasy team kind of already has their spot secured. But I will mention a couple of guys that have a chance to continue impressive preseasons that will lead to them getting more and more playing time, not necessarily to the detriment of the guys in front of them, but to the help of the guys in front of them. Because if these teams start scoring a lot of points and they get big leads, they're going to 9 times out of 10 start sparingly using their lead dogs, especially running back. So I'll park right there and tell you this. I want Tank Bigsby to have another big game because I've seen enough of Tank Bigsby in training camp. I've seen enough over the last 2 games that looks so much different, although similar to the person we saw last year, right? He always was in shape. He was always a bulldozer. He always ran hard. He's now just doing it with a little more confidence. And he does appear to even be in better shape than he was last year. He looked like a dude who had just got to the NFL last year. This year, he looks like a dude who understands what it's like to be in the NFL and who has actually maximized the strength and conditioning program that he really, really didn't need. But I just believe the light bulb has come on for Tank Bigsby. I think at some point in Tank Bigsby's career, like right now with Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby is a pure backup. He is a number 2. That doesn't mean he won't play. That doesn't mean he's not important. That doesn't mean that they won't have areas where he can really, really contribute to this team. What it means is this. I think before the end of his career, whether that's here in Jacksonville or somewhere else, barring injury, Tank Bigsby is going to be a dude who either starts or he's going to split time with somebody else. I think he's that good of a football player. The way that it appeared. I liked him when he came out of Auburn, but then he did the rookie thing and it didn't look too good. You were hoping that he came out of it. Add in the fact that we all admit that the Jaguars run offense because of the offensive line has been very, very porous. I don't know if y'all know what porous is, but it kind of just means it absorbs a lot, right? Non-porous stuff that doesn't have porosity prevents things from coming in. So there's the barber side of me. But the point that I'm actually trying to make is this. He is just like Travis Etienne and just like Trevor Lawrence and the receivers. They're all going to be dependent on the offensive line playing well. But I do think that he can show what he's shown this preseason where first contact doesn't bother him. He had 57 yards last week and 56 came after first contact. So we need to eliminate first contact and we need to make sure he continues to get yards despite that contact, trying to prohibit it. One way you can do that is something I mentioned in the first segment, and that is Who's going to play left guard? Is it Cole Van Lannon, who filled in various spots along the offensive line, but looks like a dude that's ready to start pushing people around and has come on a lot as of late? Is it going to be Ezra Cleveland, the person that they traded for last year, although they did the same thing with Van Lannon 2 years ago? I think it was 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, where they traded up to Green Bay and got him, which is a good place to go get an offensive lineman or a wide receiver, because it seems like they always have a whole bunch of them, right? The thing is, for me, I don't care who they put out there, as long as who they put out there ain't getting put on his butt in the backfield, so these guys can really, really go out and do the things that they want to do. Are we going to see the entire offensive line? How long will we see them? Will this finally be the year that they say, you know what, Tyler Shatley, we love you. You're probably the strongest guy on the team, but it ain't working out. We're going to move forward. That is something that I value guys like that. I really do. And I've had a running joke that that Tyler Shatley was going to be on this team, and I was going to be 90 years old, right? Getting a 1-year deal. It's good that I was able to make that joke, because I was reminded just the other day exactly how long Tyler Shatley has been here. It has been 11 years. Do you understand where I'm coming from? A buddy of mine who was a scout here in Jacksonville, who hasn't been here for a long time, he hasn't even set foot in Jacksonville for 6 years. He says, Tyler Shatley's still there. I remember that Dave Caldwell kept moving him back on the board, and he has an 11-year career here in Jacksonville. At some point, do the Jacksonville Jaguars decide that although he's reliable, although 11 years is a good thing, and he's been here the entire time, he's never been a full-time starter, do we now finally just go, we got to cut bait, man, we got to move on? Not because there's something wrong with him, but mainly because that's a spot that we realize this dude is never going to be good enough to start for us, and maybe we invest that in a young player. That young player could very well be Darrell Williams. That's another dude. He's number 60. I want to watch him tonight. I want to watch Darrell Williams. My friend Tom McManus, longtime Jaguar linebacker, who's still a member of the media, he's still around. He said Darrell Williams actually played better than Luke Fortner. I don't think the Jaguars are going to cut Luke Fortner. They could, and I want to see exactly what Luke Fortner is able to do when he gets in the game. He still don't push people around. He's still not stout. This would have to take a major, major admission, if you will, by everybody, all of them. I remember last year, you talked about Doug Peterson, the head coach. You talk about Trent Baalke, the GM, that are ultimately the guys that make the decision. But I remember Press Taylor actually talking about Luke Fortner when he got here 2 years ago, and said that Fortner, they were very, very familiar with him from college, because the coaching in college is very, very similar to them and how they move and what they were doing at Kentucky. So I want to see, are the Jaguars going to be bold enough to allow what they see on the field to really help make this decision, or these decisions, before those players are actually cut or kept? That's going to be a very, very important thing. A lot of competition in the defensive backfield, but this competition is a little bit different. I believe they have a whole bunch of guys that are worthy to play, 12, 13 dudes. Who's going to be the veteran safety? I've already said that I think that's Terrell Edmonds. Of course, we know Gibson is not going to be, Tayshaun Gibson isn't eligible to play until week 7. So if I'm not mistaken, they don't necessarily have to make a decision on him, because he'll go on whatever list that goes on, and they don't have to make a decision on how they're going to move around him until like week 7. And I believe a lot of stuff like Dewey Wingard's health, how Antonio Johnson plays, which veteran they keep, and how healthy they can keep the secondary. Montaric Brown is very, very interesting for me, because Buster has really, really developed. He just probably hasn't developed at the rate that Christian Braswell has, who's going to be the starting nickel. And then to think that you can never have too many corners, but they went out and drafted Jarian Jones. They signed Ronald Darby. They extended Tyson Campbell, who we're going to use in a compare and contrast segment on the next segment. They have really, really, really addressed the corner position, and they've had guys step up, and they even went out and got even more veterans to compete. I heard they really like Amani Urari. I think that's how you say his name. He's 6'2", 200 pounds, guy who's been around, for a long, long time. It depends how many people they keep. And then it also depends on exactly how they feel about veteran guys like Trey Flowers, Eric Hallett, who are versatile enough to not only play on the corner, but they can play in the slot and they can even move to safety. We're going to talk about compare and contrast. It's going to be very interesting. I mentioned Tyson Campbell. Tyson Campbell and Terrell, the safety for the Atlanta Falcons. It's going to be very, very interesting to watch those guys. I hope they both play. And the reason why AJ Terrell, because AJ Terrell just signed a contract extension that kind of looks exactly like the one that Tyson Campbell signed. And there are a lot of people that believe neither one of them should have got a contract extension. I'm not in that class. I think they both deserved it. And I think the teams did the right thing by them. I'm going to discuss that and other positions from a team perspective in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. That's right, LinkedIn Talent Solutions. I've opened businesses before, in fact, 3. And I know a lot of people out there have too. And some of the hardest things to do is keep your eyes on the prize when you're dealing with contractors and you're dealing with regulations and you're dealing with all of that. You sometimes forget, I actually need employees. And when you're hiring for a small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for that role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals. Now, I know it can be very, very difficult, but wouldn't you want to go to a place that on a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit any other leading job sites? That's right. I know you would. So it's not like you're looking on LinkedIn. You're looking in the wrong place if you're not looking on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. That is something. It helped me and it can help you. Here's what you do. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. LinkedIn knows the small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. Let them do it for you. Now, post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Third and final segment on Locked On Jaguars. We have made it to week 3 of the preseason. Woo! Everybody was ready for training camp. Then people were ready for preseason. Then after about 1 quarter of preseason, folks were like, I'm ready for the regular season. So the preseason will end tonight. The regular season will start in 2 weeks for the Jaguars. It'll start about 10 days for whoever's opening up on that Monday night game or that Thursday night game. But the point that I'm making is the next 2 weeks are going to be very important. The Jags will have time to reevaluate or evaluate their roster, and then they'll have to cut down. And then once they cut down, the Jags are then going to evaluate all the other cut downs, and they're going to establish their 53. And then after that, they're going to establish their practice squad. So there's a little bit more work to be done. But tonight, there's something else I want you to pay attention to once those matchups start happening. First of all, pay attention to your starters. Compare the starters of the Jaguars to this new team of the Atlanta Falcons. Competent quarterback play. Watch the tight ends. I really want to see what they're able to do with the tight end now in Atlanta with those big receivers. Kyle Pitts is coming to, he's going to play against the Jaguars, and the people believe he's been misused. And I've talked about the tight end position a lot here. Look at him and Evan Ingram and see, can we stack up? I want you to pay attention to Bijan Robinson, who is, if there are 2 backs in the league that remind me of each other, I used to say it was Marion Barber and like Beast Mode, right? I really think Bijan Robinson and Travis Etienne have a lot in common because they're both dual threats. They're both home run threats. They do a lot of the same things, a little bit different, same speed. I want to, who's better? I want to see if our receivers are better than their receivers. Their offensive line is really, really good, at least name-wise, with guys like Jake Matthews and Matthew Bergeron, Chris Lindstrom, of course, Caleb McCary. The Jaguars have a little bit more trepidation about their offensive line. So I want to compare and contrast those two. I also want to see our defensive line against that offensive line. Really, it's going to be in the first half when the starters are out there, it's going to be a really, really nice test to give you an idea. Look, if they need something, this game's going to show it. If they need something, this game's going to show it. Hopefully they got their finger on the pulse of the team and they understand exactly what they need. But just in case they don't, this game will make it very, very obvious because Grady Jarrett on the other side and Zach Harrison and Matthew Judon that these guys play, and Arnold Ebiketie. They are all really, really good players up front. In the secondary, we mentioned Terrell and Justin Simmons and Jesse Bates and Mike Hughes and D. Alford. That is a very, very good secondary. So Trevor's going to have to be on his game. The receivers, are they as good as we think they are? Because there's going to be competition on the other side to make sure that if they're as good as they say they are, this is a good idea to find out. Because Press Taylor, the offense coordinator, the other day said, well, Brian Thomas Jr. ain't ready yet, but he'll be ready by the time we get to the opening season. Well, it's his last chance to show whether or not he's going to be ready by the time you get to the opener in a couple of weeks. A lot of good things to compare. Compare Tyson Campbell. Compare Tyson Campbell to A.J. Terrell. Look at their contracts. They're very, very similar, right? The other thing that's very, very similar, as I mentioned, is a lot of folks that believe that both of them got paid a little bit too early. Well, who plays well tonight and who doesn't, right? This is a very, very interesting matchup for me. I think Atlanta is the perfect team for the Jaguars to measure themselves against because they have a veteran quarterback. They have a lot of explosive people, a lot of young people in their skill positions. They have a big, big physical offensive line. They have some dudes on the other side on defense that can hurt you on each level of their defense. And I just believe it's an opportunity for the Jaguars to really, really, really come out and get some confidence about themselves, to come out and really, really establish themselves as a team that heads into the regular season that has a lot more good things going for them than they do bad. Also, it's another good chance for you to see guys like Parker Washington and see Tank Bigsby, who I mentioned earlier, and see how they fit into your fantasy football program. Even look at the Atlanta Falcons. I don't care about that because, you know, you can't choose all Jaguars when you pick your fantasy team. So maybe there's somebody over there that you think will have a good year. Anyway, I want you to enjoy the game. And then what I want you to do, since it's a road game, as soon as the game is over, I want you to tune in to Locked On Jaguars on YouTube. We will go live and do a postcast of the game. We're going to tell you everything we saw. We're going to be deadly honest with you about it so that, you know, you'll never get lied to here on this show, and we don't sugarcoat anything. So make sure you tap in, please, to Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. Enjoy the game tonight. It is the last time for a lasting impression on the Jaguars. Who's going to make it? Who's not? The only way you find out and get an opinion of it about yourself is to watch the game tonight. So make sure you do that. We appreciate you making Locked On Jaguars your first listen today. Now go listen to Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get daily insight to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. You can find the link of Locked On Fantasy Football in the description so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'll see you after the game. You guys make sure it's raining outside. You guys make sure you travel safely to and from work. Enjoy the game tonight, and then come enjoy the postcast with me tonight. Happy last preseason game. Y'all take care of each other, and I'll do the same.